Welcome back to Lifegroups. We are talking this fall about loving our neighbors well. We talked about the Good Samaritan the first week, and we talked about fear and difference last week. Today we're talking about speaking, and listening. I've got Graham Bodie, who is professor of integrated marketing and communication at the University of Mississippi. In addition to that, he has a role with the Listen First Project as the chief listening officer.
Yes.
And we're so glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're talking about speaking and listening. It's something that the Bible talks about, particularly in the New Testament in the book of James. James is interested in how we live out our faith in our daily life. He's particularly interested in the way that we use words, the way that we speak. He's very concerned that we make mistakes with our words, that we, with the same mouth, we bless the Lord our God and curse those made in the image of God. He says things like we should be quick to listen and slow to speak. He says we make all kinds of problems with our words.
Yes, stumble all the time.
We stumble all the time with our words. But anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you got into communication as a field professionally, and then also some of the things that you've learned through your research.
Sure. So I worked at a gas station when I was in high school, and the guy that managed the gas station was a linguist. Now, I wasn't trained professionally as a linguist, but he taught me the importance of language. And so when I would give directions, everybody thinks you should get directions from people at gas stations. So they would come in and ask, which way to the interstate? And I would say, well, if you go up the road and, go at the green light, take a left and blah, blah, blah. And I would finish and the customer would leave and Lynn would say, what if the light's red? And I would say, just these little peculiarities about language, right? And I don't know if that made me go into the field, but it certainly is something I reflect back on and think of just the importance of language and how we talk. My particular background is how people process information, so I study listening in particular, and I focus on what happens when you're stressed and you go to somebody. What do they say, not only to make you feel better, but oftentimes to make you feel worse. And so those are largely my areas of expertise, as well as kind of the filters and biases that we use to, when we listen to other people.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the problems that we get into in conversation with one another when it comes to communication, particularly in the midst of stress?
Yeah, so it's a good question because I harbor all of them. So I should be the first to say, the thing that I study is the thing that I struggle with as well. And so we all have our own, idiosyncratic issues and problems. I think a lot of times we, assume that the way that we see the world and the way that we go forth in the world is objectively sort of the right way to go. And it's hard for us to take the perspective of other people. And even when we try to take the perspective of other people, it's impossible. We've never actually lived exactly like those people have lived. And so how are we supposed to truly understand why they might believe what they believe? So it's a lot easier to think, well, they just have a bunch of wrong beliefs than it is to think, no one wakes up on a Saturday morning and says, I'd like to have some wrong beliefs today. I'd really like to go out and just believe some wrong things because I didn't wake up like that and you didn't wake up like that, so why should I think that other people wake up like that? So if our communication is based on the sense that I'm right and you're wrong, we're going to probably have a lot of conflict. When we get into conflict, we do things that seem intuitively correct, like I'm prone to anger, which clearly in the verse for today is something that James warns us about. And so it's easy to quickly go to those knee-jerk reactions that you sort of were socialized to do as you grew up, but there typically aren't productive ways of interacting with other people.
So what are some productive ways that you can counteract maybe the idiosyncratic deficiencies that you might have with communication? Right. What are some of the things that you can work on, or some of the things that you've found helpful from your research?
Yeah, so the first is to be aware, what are those things that you are prone to do? Have somebody in your life supportive to be able to kind of point those things out to you, even if it's hard to say, yes, you're right that I am like that. So awareness, when do those happen? Is it with particular people or at particular times of the day, like when you're tired at the end of the day? And once you have that list, could journal for a week or whatever and figure out what those things are. And then you just pick one. What am I going to work on today day, knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to change, 30 or 40 years of behavior in a day. It's going to take a lot of time to change those behaviors. With anger in particular, there's the 1-minute breath exercises. There's ways of kind of, mindful meditation to try to, calm yourself down in the moment. Try to think, in the grand scheme of things, is this thing really all that big of a deal? Should I be arguing for this right now, or I should just allow the other person to speak? Or just, sort of in your mind keep saying, like, this is the other person's turn to talk, and so I'm going to sort of quiet my mind and remind myself when my attention flutters away, right, come back, there's a person in front of me that I need to be paying attention to.
One of the things I've heard you say is that you think, in addition to speech classes in high schools or community colleges or universities, we should also teach civics as a part of kind of civic education. Right. We should teach listening. Why do you think that's so important right now?
Yeah, I think because we're quick to assume that our point of view is right, and we live in a diverse culture with diverse opinions and people, and so the ability to talk across those differences, I think, is a skill that we oftentimes don't learn young or even at all, or it takes us until we're adults to realize that we might need that skill, or we assume that we have the skill, and then we find out really we're only really good at interacting with those people around us. I mean, the fact that we're segregated in so many ways in society, from where we live to where we go to school to where we go to church, being around people who are different from us, not only how we look but also how we believe, is a hard thing to do. So exposure to different beliefs and different people, and then working through those differences, not necessarily to compromise, although that's one possibility. I mean, the fact that we have a House and a Senate in the United States government is a form of compromise, which was you just get both. Right, it wasn't either or. The small states wanted, equal representation, and the big states wanted, right, a House of Representatives. So we just made both of them, right? So compromise doesn't have to be split in the middle where both sides lose, right? And so thinking through all these kinds of solutions in actual situations where we're across from someone who differs from us, either a little bit or a lot, I think is a skill that, we ought to be teaching in grade school. We ought to be teaching as part of civics education how to dialogue across difference.
So, the topic tonight is thinking about how we love our neighbors well. But I also think communication is something, speaking and listening is something that we struggle with, not just with people out there. I think it's something that the church struggles with. It's also something that families struggle with.
Struggle with it every day.
Yeah, so when you think about, I guess, relationships with spouses or children or with your family, I guess, how do you practice those things with the people close to you so that you're, perhaps, I guess in some ways it's easier to communicate with folks who are strangers than
Sometimes
the people you know so well. I guess when you think about the kind of skills that you can develop in listening in civic engagement or with neighbors, how do you think about the way that also translates to families and to the church?
I mean, the family is the one that you take for granted. It's the one that you ought to be your best self with, but oftentimes it's the one that you're worst self with. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And for me, I've got to be mindful that when I go home, that they don't know what happened in the 8 hours or however many hours that I was away, right? And it really doesn't matter what happened in those hours, because I'm supposed to be there and present with them at this moment, right? And so, you've got not only sort of the fatigue and everything that happens that makes you not your best, self as a listener or a communicator. But, I'm reminded of a story I heard recently where, the husband comes home and is like, oh, you're not going to believe this. This guy gave me some advice, and it's the best advice I've ever heard. And he tells his wife the advice, and she goes, He goes, what? She goes, I've been telling you that for 10 years. Like, why did it take a stranger that you met for 10 minutes to tell you the same advice,
Yes, same.
Right? It happens. It happens to me. It happens to everyone. And so when we receive advice from those closest to us who know us best, what we should do is accept that advice, but what we often do is we question the motives of that person giving the advice. Mm-hmm. And so reminding yourself that this person has the best motives for you, that they have your best intentions, that they love you, they care for you, they're trying to make you a better person. I have had to tell myself that through almost every day of 16 years of marriage, that this person loves me unconditionally and is trying to make me a better person, and in fact has made me a better person. And I think if we can make, and the kids and everything as well, I think we can keep that in mind. I think that would probably be a good step forward.
Yeah, somebody, a wise older pastor once told me that my wife's voice is the voice of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
And I think that's important. It's important for James. James thinks that one of the keys to good communication, to speaking and listening, is the spirit that animates our life together. And I think that's something that we can talk about tonight. What are the spirits that animate your life? Spirits of anger or competitiveness or aggression, or rather the spirit that comes from above, the spirit that's pure, that's undefiled, that is making for peace. James thinks that there is a harvest of righteousness that is available for those who make for peace. So tonight, have that conversation. Thanks to Graham for being with us today. Yeah. And we hope you guys have a good time at Life Group.